I wish someone would tell me this, so I want to tell people who are listening, do not be afraid to ask for help and do not be afraid to ask questions. People in the public interest space, they want to help you. They want you to be there. In general, like people want to help. They want to mentor you. They want to give you advice. So please ask me, ask the people leading this podcast. Like everyone wants to help. And so don't be afraid to just go for it.
Hi, everybody. This is How Tech Becomes Law, a public interest tech podcast about technology, public policy, and career advice. We are your co-hosts, Jingyan Zhang and Dhruv Gupta. This week, we have a conversation with Ariana Soto from Coding It Forward about getting young professionals working in civic tech.
Ariana helps lead Coding It Forward and has been with the organization since 2018. She leads Coding It Forward's partnerships and new program launches, including the Civic Innovation Core. Ariana graduated from Harvard College in 2020 with a BA in Government and Computer Science and a certificate in Technology Science. Ariana has experience in local government working with data teams in New York City and her hometown of Los Angeles, California. Thanks so much for joining us. Can you tell us more about, what you're up to at Coding It Forward?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here. Coding It Forward, in short, is a nonprofit by and for young people, creating new opportunities and pathways into social impact and civic technology. I'm happy to dig into a little bit more about what that means and how we started, but that is the short of what we are and what we do. We were founded in 2017 by a group of college students who were really looking to use their tech skills in mission-driven technical internships. The funny story we like to tell is that the only thing that they could find was an unpaid government internship installing Microsoft SharePoint on government computers. That was not going to cut it for them. So Coding It Forward started as a jobs board. The students were just kind of sharing any and every public interest role, job, internship that they could find with other students who were interested. We were lucky enough to be connected to someone at the U.S. Census Bureau who was looking to bring on students into the Census Bureau in the summer of 2017, and thus became kind of our bread and butter program, which is the Civic Digital Fellowship. It is a 10-week internship in the federal government. We recruit across 4 project areas. It's pretty consistent with what people will recruit for big tech internships. So software engineering, design, product management, and data science. And so students work for 10 weeks on a highly scoped project in a federal agency across those 4 project areas. And that's kind of who we are and where we started. And we've been doing it ever since. We just wrapped up our 6th cohort of federal interns this summer.
Wow.
And across 10 different federal agencies. So we've scaled quite a bit since our first summer at the Census Bureau, but that's one of our main programs. And we just launched our newest program this summer as well, called the Civic Innovation Core. And it's the first time that we're placing students at the state and local level. So we had 55 interns join us this summer at 6 different cities and 3 different states, working across those same 4 project areas for 10-week internships. But we now have over 300 alums of our program. So we've grown quite a bit since 2017, but super excited to now be able to offer the kinds of internships that our founders were looking for way back when.
Wow. That's got to be a lot of alum, right? There must be a lot of folks that are part of the organization. What are the kinds of things they've been working on?
Yeah. With over 300 alums, it's sometimes hard to pick my favorite 2, but I'd love to speak a little bit probably about the most recent cohort that we had. Like I mentioned, this was the first year that we had interns at the state and local level. And so some really neat projects going on there around COVID relief, economic recovery due to COVID specifically. It was a really interesting time to be, and really necessary time for us to be bringing in talent to different municipalities across the country. And so we had 2 core members working with the Los Angeles mayor's data team. They were assessing the city's social equitability and choosing business partners. And the really cool thing there is that it was the city's first attempt to do so in over 20 years. So it was really a project where the team may not have had capacity to do something like that, but because they were getting 2 interns for the summer, that was possible. So we see a lot of things like that where on the federal level, interns have saved federal agencies millions of dollars and cut years off of production timelines. So it's been really incredible to not only be able to bring the talent there and have interns have a really fantastic experience, many times their first time in government, but also to hear from the agency and the host office side that interns are really able to have a really big impact in just 10 weeks. Because I think people are sometimes skeptical about that 10-week timeline. It's like, how much can you actually get done? But we found that people can really, really make a difference in just that short amount of time.
That sounds fantastic. So given the hundreds of interns that you have now worked with, what are some stories about what happens after that 10 weeks is over? How many of the interns continue pursuing work in this area?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say it's quite a big spread, recognizing that many of our interns are still in school. So undergrads or grad students who kind of are doing an internship for the summer. So I would say a vast majority of people are going back to school. But we do hear that for those people that are even going back to school, like a seed has been planted. Most, if not all of our interns, this is the first opportunity they've ever had to work inside government. And they tell us that one, I can't tell you the number of people that I interview for our programs who are like, I did not even know that an opportunity like this existed. Like, that's so cool. And then to have people go through our program and then tell us that the seed has been planted and that while they don't know what their next step is after college quite yet, or grad program or whatever they're doing at the moment, they now know that government service and public service exists and that it's something that they would love to come back to eventually. So outside of people going back to school, I would say we do see a pretty large amount of folks who will go back into the public sphere, wherever that might be. We've had quite a few interns actually continue on at the agency that they were working at. So I actually just found out that one of our core members from this summer is staying on at the city of Boston, which is really cool as a data scientist. We have a couple of people who've stayed on at the Census Bureau across the past number of cohorts. So there is some number of that where we can kind of, government hiring is a bit of a challenge. So we have really awesome partners who have been able to kind of work through the system and help people get on a lot quicker than you might typically find. But we have seen some of that. And then some people go back into industry to continue kind of refining those skills and picking up skills that aren't quite accessible quite yet at the public sector level. But yeah, a big spread of where people end up. But I think the big thing, which I've said 5 million times already, is just like planting that seed of like, people now know that these kinds of opportunities exist. And there's a lot of fabulous mid-career opportunities and later career opportunities that they can come back to when they want.
Looking at this seed that you're planting in folks, what is sort of the field that you're looking at here? Or I guess more precisely, how do you define civic tech or public interest tech in your view at your organization?
Yeah, I would say my favorite definition, just to give Sid Harrell a shout out, if you have not picked up her book, A Civic Technologist Practice Guide, definitely do so if you're kind of an early career techie who's interested in the civic tech space. She defines it as a loosely integrated movement that brings the strengths of the private sector world, so people, methods, actual technology, to public entities with the aim of making government more responsive, efficient, modern, and more just. And I think that's a really awesome and comprehensive definition of the space, and is very much kind of how we view the space. Civic tech encompasses all sorts of things. It's not just government. There are a lot of incredible organizations who are doing just broader social impact work. And we have so far kind of filled that government piece with the internships that we provide. Though I will add that we last year launched the Impact Fellowship, which was our first dive into a 1-year post-grad opportunity. And so we kind of connected recent grads with opportunities at nonprofits, at social impact orgs that were not just within government. So while our bread and butter is kind of these 10-week government internships, I would say we've also kind of on the horizon seen that we'd love to bring opportunities to folks not just within the government space, because I think civic tech and public interest tech at large is so much more expansive than just government itself.
What do you see as sort of the difference between the post-grad programs that you've done versus like maybe the internships? Are the programs different? Are folks different? Sounds like they're not just in the same space. Some of them are outside of the government.
Yeah, I think the big difference there is that the 1 year opportunity that we did was not necessarily within government. It was in the broader space. The difference is that many, as I mentioned previously, like many of our 10-week internship program cohort participants are people who are kind of still in school or not ready to commit to a year-long tour of service in the space and are looking to kind of dip their toes in the water and see what it's about. Whereas kind of the 1 year opportunities, they're really, really committed to taking that year to work in the social impact space and dedicate themselves to that. But I would say there's still a big gap. There was only 6 impact fellows for that program this first year, and we'd love to continue to provide that opportunity. I would say in this space at large, there's still a pretty big gap in terms of kind of the career packages that people are offered when they step into the public space immediately post grad. Like the Impact Fellowship is probably one of the first opportunities that we've seen and we created in partnership with Schmidt Futures and the Federation for American Scientists. But I would love to see more opportunities like that because I think all of the programs that we've done have just proven that there's no lack of people interested in these kinds of opportunities. Like, how do we get them those opportunities so that they can take that?
What are the lessons that you think civic tech can learn from other groups and movements such as public interest law or public interest health that look out for the public interest in a given sector?
Yeah, 100%. I think public interest tech was definitely inspired by the public interest law movement. So that's the kind of direct connection that we always like to make. So the 1960s public interest law movement really empowered legal students to serve the public and engage in law firms that did pro bono work. And we like to say if the nation's top law students, the big thing that people are striving towards is serving in the public space, becoming federal judges, kind of making their way through federal circuits. And we ask, like, why can't the same be said for the nation's top tech students? So I would say that's where we kind of draw inspiration from is that public interest law model of bringing the nation's best and brightest to the public sphere, as opposed to immediately kind of falling into the private space.
What are your thoughts on also the training that actually happens at a university setting when students are in school in terms of preparing them for careers in law that is going to be serving the public interest? And what are the kind of trainings that you think should be developed in school as well for young professionals and students to then have a successful career in civic tech?
Yes, that's a fantastic question. I think there are a lot of incredible people kind of asking those questions and thinking about them. But my first thoughts would be, I mean, people go to law school, which is a whole other 4 years of training and skill building. So a bit different in comparison, since most people are just hopping into jobs from kind of technical undergraduate or graduate degrees. I think it varies, right? Because public interest law is a very specific, it's law, it's the field. I think the public interest tech space is so much broader. So you can have people doing public interest tech academic work or people going into government or just social impact orgs. But I would say specifically to what Coding It Forward sees in the government space, there aren't a ton of opportunities for people to really understand like what it's like to work in government. Like, how can we get people that experience while they're still in school so that they are a little bit more equipped to be a bureaucracy hacker or someone who's okay with existing in a space that is less defined than they might find in another opportunity. A lot of our students come to us and are like so stressed out that their project that they're working on for 10 weeks isn't like a final deliverable that has been highly scoped that they're going to accomplish in 10 weeks. And I have to like explain to them, like, this is government. Like, you're probably not going to have a fancy, shiny, like ends deliverable, but like know that the work that you're leaving behind is going to really help the team that you've been put on for those 10 weeks. So giving students those opportunities while they're still in school to learn those kinds of skills and really understand the nitty gritty, like difficult things that go into working in the public interest tech space. And I'd quickly add that there are a couple of different academic programs who are starting to do these kinds of things. I had the opportunity of taking Nick Sinai's course at the Harvard Kennedy School. He places students on teams with different government partners for the semester. Throughout the entire semester, you're really getting to go through the design process of what it's like to work in government and work on a project. And so it's one of the only opportunities that I've seen of that kind. And I'd love to see more things pop up like that, because I think I really got an awesome opportunity to learn what it was like to work in government and the challenges that come with that throughout the semester. So things like that, I think, just to really give people not just to read about what working in government is like or what working in the public space is like, but really giving them the opportunity to do projects in the space, or at least meet and talk with people who can kind of help them build those skills.
Outside of academic institutions, who are the other partners who are interested in supporting your fellows and core members for projects like these?
We've been really fortunate to have some really awesome partners like the Ford Foundation and Schmidt Futures, who really believe in investing in this type of work. Also, the wonderful folks at New America, who we've gotten to have fantastic conversations with and really be thought partners in thinking about how can we expand opportunities in this space. We had been wanting to bring interns to the state and local level for quite some time and just didn't have the team capacity to do so, and finally did this summer. But then there was the question of funding, recognizing that state and local governments have really been struggling with COVID, and no one had money to hire interns. I think interns were the number one thing to go when people were making budget cuts. And so our funding partners were really important to making sure that program was happening. And I think will continue to be important as we continue to build out the space. Is we need really incredibly technical, capable people who want to serve in government. Government might just not have the money to bring those folks in at this time, especially as we continue to recover from COVID. And so we're really thankful to the partners who have stepped in and allowed us to bring those kinds of opportunities, not only to the students and the young people that we serve, but also to state and local governments who really need that talent to help them to continue to do the fantastic work that they do to serve constituents on a day-to-day basis.
Speaking of that need for talent, especially post-COVID recovery and how much of everything that we did went online the last year and a half, 2 years, the government clearly needs to revamp its technology from the local to federal level. Where's the bottleneck? How do we expedite this? How do we get new technology into the system?
I think there are tons of ways to answer that and a bunch of different factors, which we don't have time for today. But I will say I will tackle that from the talent side of things, which is what Coding It Forward does. We have proven that there is no lack of talent interested in these kinds of opportunities. Our acceptance rate for our program falls somewhere between 3 and 4%, which means there are a ton of people who want to do this work. We just don't have enough opportunities. And that's that we placed 98 interns at the federal level this summer and 55 at the state and local level. There's so much interest. What we would love to see is just for there to be more opportunities for young people to enter the space. That's at least what we see as the bottleneck for bringing young people into government, is how do we create those opportunities, and opportunities that are equitable and are going to allow people to take that kind of opportunity over another opportunity at a big firm or a big tech company that's going to financially support them in a way that, very candidly, like a lot of public interest tech and civic tech opportunities just don't. And I don't think that's a problem that we can't solve. I think that's what I see as a big bottleneck right now, just in terms of the talent side, is how can we create opportunities that someone can easily say, I'm going to take this opportunity over the one next door, just because it's given me a great opportunity to learn, to grow, and to also just feel financially secure and feel like I'm building skills.
Is that issue primarily at the new grad or entry level side, or is it pervasive throughout mid-career and beyond?
Yeah, I think the answer to the question might have been different like a decade ago, but I think a ton of fantastic programs for mid-career and professional level people have rolled out. Our friends at 18F, the PIF program, USDS, Code for America, all these incredible orgs that have very much influenced the work that Coding It Forward has tried to do. So I would say there's definitely growth everywhere. I'm sure we can create more opportunities for folks in that part of their professional pipeline, 100%. But for us, I would say the big gap still is this early career pipeline, is how do we create those kinds of opportunities for people? Coding It Forward remains kind of one of the main opportunities to do so, at least in the government space. And I will give a fun shout out to the newly created program, the Digital Core, which is actually the first early career 2-year-long opportunity program for technologists in the federal government. Coding It Forward served as a model for that program. And so the work that we did was able to kind of prove that this was something that was needed and necessary. And so that launched not too long ago. And so really excited to see where that leads people. And we now finally have a place where we can be like, if you do our internship and you like it and this is something you want to do, we now have at least one opportunity where you can go and you can serve in government. So yes, I would say that is the gap, is this early career space, which we're working on. And I think it's definitely grown a ton since we launched in 2017. The word public interest tech was not in anyone's vocabulary when we popped into the scene. So there's definitely been growth and movement and so much work to still be done.
So Dhruv and I have had the fantastic privilege of working with you at Harvard over the last several years and seeing your journey to coding it forward firsthand. Can you tell our listeners how you got to where you are?
Sure. Yeah, it is a winding road. As I'm sure anyone that you speak to in the civic tech space, most of the time it's not like a straightforward, like, I wanted this job and I found it and I applied for it. No, it's usually a winding road and kind of a bit of an accident. So I wanted to study CS when I got to Harvard. Quickly realized after the intro to the CS course that it was not for me. And it was quite frankly very intimidating. And like, I can now admit to myself that I was intimidated and kind of just jumped ship, which is totally fine. I don't think I could have admitted that to myself as a freshman, but I'll say it now in case there's anyone listening to this podcast that might find that helpful and a helpful truth to share. So that is my truth, but I don't regret any of it. I landed in government as a major with a minor in CS, and I am so thankful for what that experience brought me. But the summer after my freshman year, I'm from Los Angeles, went back home, didn't have any plans to intern anywhere, was just gonna enjoy my summer. And my dad ran into someone who, and you know, dads, they like to share that their daughters is interested in computer science and like, woohoo. So he comes home and he's like, I found an unpaid internship for you. Like someone in my building like does tech and they would love to have you. And thus became my internship, which like that was not planned. And so that summer I discovered that civic tech was a thing. At that point, I don't even know if civic tech was like a real definition that people were using, but I was doing technology in government. It sounds wild now to say that, but like when I did not know that people were using technology in government, like that just was not a thing that was on my radar. I spent that summer very simply adding metadata to police data sets that were on the Los Angeles Open Data Portal, got introduced to the Los Angeles Mayor's data team. Full circle moment is the LA data team was a partner this year at the Civic Innovation Corps, which is a fun fact. But yeah, that was my first intro to civic tech. Did not look for it, just fell into it. Got back to campus sophomore year and was like, okay, this is something I would like to do. Applied for an internship at the New York Mayor's Office of Data Analytics for the next summer. And then just tried to find as many professors as I could who were doing this work. I could probably count on my hand the number of people my sophomore year who were interested in this. It definitely grew as I made my way, but Professor Sweeney was an incredible resource. Professor Nick Sinai, an incredible resource. I took a class at the law school as a sophomore with Professor Susan Crawford. Again, like I just had to find it. And I think I'm finding that now on campus, there are a ton more opportunities that you don't have to like really search for anymore, which is fantastic and was definitely the case by the time I reached senior year. I just kind of was actively trying to find as many people I could find on campus who would talk to me about it. I was sitting in the dining hall one day, an email came over a listserv, Coding It Forward was looking to hire. And I was like, what is this? Like, thank God I read the email because I would not be here today without it. But one of our co-founders had sent an email over a listserv and was like, we're coding it forward. This is what we do. We're looking to hire. And I was like, hey, like, I just did something that sounds very similar to this in Los Angeles. Met with one of the co-founders in a dining hall a few weeks later. Coincidentally, like had met people this summer in LA that like knew what Coding It Forward were doing. And so you find that the civic tech community is very small and very connected. And the Coding It Forward team took me on in the spring of 2018. I've been with them ever since. So worked in a part-time capacity as a student, learned a ton and joined full-time after I graduated in May of 2020. Long-winded story that you asked for a short one, but that was kind of long. But basically, I fell into civic tech accidentally, and I am still here I exist in this space because I hope that no one else's story has to be like that moving forward. I hope that people know that this is something that exists, that this is something that they can choose, and that there are opportunities for them to do that so that they don't have to have a winding path like I did.
Speaking of that winding path, though, I graduated in your year as well, and saw a lot of that transition for even friends and peers of mine saying, "Oh, hey, like I can end up in civic tech too," but most of them ended up in big tech. Why do you think folks, kind of consider moving into civic tech early into their career versus like ending up at big tech maybe? And like, what are the trade-offs of establishing your career, paying off some student loans, learning some skills versus going straight into working for federal, state, or local government?
Yeah, 100%. But I would say, while Coding It Forward believes that and while I believe that it's important for us to kind of plant the seeds for someone to enter public service, we're definitely not opposed to someone gaining technical training and experience in big tech. I think that's why we're having this conversation. And we've mentioned it previously, like the public interest tech space still isn't at a comparative level in terms of like on the job training, like on the job technical skills learning. I think we need to work to create opportunities that offer the same kinds of opportunities that big tech has. So training, professional development, salary benefits. And we recognize that the public interest tech space in general is still a bit of a long ways away from where big tech is in terms of those kinds of opportunities to learn and grow. We're working on it. And we know it's not a perfect first step for everyone to enter public service. We hope that it will be eventually, but I think it's not always an easy first move. And so how can we create opportunities that are equitable and allow people to take a step into public service instead of big tech? But definitely not opposed to it. I think many professionals in the civic tech space have told our interns as they're looking for their next opportunity, like maybe do a tour in big tech so that you can gain skills and then come back and do a tour in public service. And I think that's a lot of the orgs that I mentioned earlier, PIF, USDS, 18F, like that's kind of what the model is for later career folks as well, is like come do a tour of service and government, bring the skills that you've learned in the private space and bring that expertise to the public space.
What are your thoughts in terms of the necessary academic background for someone to be involved in civic tech? If you can talk a little bit about what it takes to apply to be a fellow or a core member with Coding It Forward, and then also more broadly, what do you think are the things that they should be looking for and get training on?
Yeah, I think people are always surprised by my answer to this question. We get it a lot when people are coming to info sessions for our programs. We don't have a degree requirement in terms of like you need to study computer science or data science. We've had interns who studied art history and architecture and geography, all kinds of incredible programs. And I think that's the really neat thing about the civic tech space, is that a lot of it is building products and services for everyday people to make the space better for everyone. And so we need people to bring in their own unique perspectives and backgrounds and identities. And I think that's what really gets me excited about the space. So I would say no degree requirement by any means. Our federal program, the criteria is undergraduate or graduate degree from a 2 or 4 year institution. That's not really Coding It Forward's doing. Unfortunately, we are tied to federal contracts and federal hiring processes. So that's kind of the constraint there. But our Civic Innovation Core program, we're super excited, is open to bootcamp and certificate grads, as well as folks who have graduated from a 2 or 4 year institution. If you're interested in civic tech, read about things that are happening in the space. Our favorite thing to tell people to do is get a Twitter account, follow incredible people in the space. You can go to Coding It Forward's followers and people that we're following and like just click on some of them. And like that's how I absorb a lot of my civic tech knowledge, is just by like reading articles that come out and reading tweets that people are sharing about the work that they're doing. And I think the really cool thing about the space is like we want people's backgrounds. We don't want everyone to be the same with the same degree and the same background and the same 4 internships that you did so that you could get here. We want your unique and winding path to the space so that you can bring your full and complete self in building products and serving others. So there are many ways that you can enter the space. And I don't think there's one cookie cutter path for you to get here. So bring yourself. And we're excited to have you. We need more people. I wish someone would tell me this, so I want to tell people who are listening, do not be afraid to ask for help and do not be afraid to ask questions. People in the public interest space they want to help you. They want you to be there. In general, like people want to help. They want to mentor you. They want to give you advice. So please ask me, ask the people leading this podcast. Like everyone wants to help. And so don't be afraid to just go for it.
Cool. This message has been approved by Jack Dorsey, one of our sponsors for that. Jokes aside, cool. Thanks so much, Ariana. We have one last question for you, our podcast question, as we call it. This podcast is called How Tech Becomes Law. And given your experience, I'd love to know, how have you seen a technology and its design create new rules for how society operates?
A fantastic question. I guess maybe somewhat of an unconventional answer to this, perhaps. We've just seen through the projects that people are working on that like real implementable change can come from just like, it's not even bringing fancy technology to government. It's just like rethinking the way that government has done things and really just using basic technology to transform the ways that we give people access to the benefits that they need. So this is kind of perhaps a local government-esque lens to things, but like building products in a way that are like easy to understand and easy to use so that like someone can access their benefits that like the government is supposed to provide them in a way that is not complicated, in a way that is incredibly accessible. I think some really great examples of like how technology has transformed the space in general. Healthcare.gov is a big one. I won't dive into the nitty gritty of what happened there, but like that's a huge one. Like just bringing technology and people with expertise to really transform the way that people could sign up for healthcare in the federal government. VA.gov, we've had fellows who have worked at the VA in previous cohorts who are just recreating forms that allow veterans to access benefits that the government provides them. There's a lot of talk currently about the child tax credit system that Code for America has been working on in tandem with the federal government, stuff like that. We have really incredible friends like Jimmy Chen at Propel and Rohan at Upsolve, who are helping people file for bankruptcy, like everyday people who like should be able to file for bankruptcy, but like the government process is difficult and hard. So I think examples like that, and we've seen it with our interns who are working at the state and local level, where they're just plugging into projects that are like redesigning websites and redesigning forms, like very simple things that don't feel super shiny and technologically fancy, but things like that I think really have an incredible power to change the way that society operates. And I think another big thing that Coding It Forward loves to focus on is like, we need to bring, not only do we need to bring young technologists in, but we also need to bring in young technologists who look like the people that they are serving. And so I think big tech, public interest tech, a lot of different professional spaces still have a lot of work to do in terms of bringing diverse people into the space. I'm a Latina working in civic tech. I have very few mentors who look like me in the space still. And so I think that's a big thing too, is we can better serve and transform society if we have diverse perspectives at the table, because someone who grew up in one place with one background is going to look at a problem very differently from someone in a different place with a different background. And so I think that people part of thing, it's a really the simple things about civic tech are the things that have the power to transform, in my opinion, is just looking at things in a new way and bringing diverse perspectives to what we're doing. There's so much incredible work being done, and we might not immediately see its impact, but I have a feeling that we'll continue to see its impact down the road.
Hey, thanks so much for joining, Ariana. Really appreciate it and love hearing about all the cool work you're doing. And thank you for listening. I'm Dhruv Gupta with Jinyan Zhang, and this was How Tech Becomes Law.
Thanks for listening to How Tech Becomes Law. We are supported by the Public Interest Tech Lab. You can find us online at howtechbecomeslaw.org and on social media channels at Tech Becomes Law. The music for this podcast was produced by Clarence Yap. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice. It really helps other listeners discover us. Thanks again for listening, and come back next week for another conversation on how tech becomes law.